I love you guys, man.
Mine goes about the animals. The bombardier beetle.
All right. Hello, everyone. We are back again. It's the Train of Thought podcast with the Biblical Christ Research Institute. I'm joined by Deron Gladden, Michael Wellen, Eric Powers, and shout out to Matt Lawrence in his absence. He's out enjoying family time, which is important. But we're gonna get back into Genesis and continue our journey through the scriptures. We'll try to get through day 5 and day 6 today. So I'm going to, as always, read the passage that we'll be attempting to get through today to see where it takes us. So I'm starting in Genesis chapter 1 and starting reading from verse 20, and I will read through to day 6, pretty much to the end of the chapter. So he says, Then God said, Let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. There was evening and there was morning, a fifth day. Then God said, Let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Then God said, Behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the surface of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you, and to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth which has life. I have given every green plant for food, and it was so. God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. So that's what we're going to try to cover today. Don't know how far we'll get, but we'll see. Because this is not necessarily a formatted podcast. We just kind of have a conversation and see where it goes. So let's get into day 5 here. So we see here in day 5 that it's talking about the birds in the sky and the creatures in the seas. Uh, so my question to you is, especially particularly verse 21, where it talks about those great sea monsters. Uh, the, what is your thought on why they differentiate that as opposed to the rest of the creatures in the water? Because you see here it says great sea monsters, and then it talks about the other creatures that are swarming in the water. Is there a specific reason why they make that distinction, or is it just
Yeah, I think God made that distinction when He gave this revelation to Moses to make a distinction between different kinds of seagoing creatures. Like you have fish, you have whales, mammals in the sea, as well as, I believe at this time, sea monsters most likely are giant dinosaurs,
Dinosaurs. Yeah.
seagoing dinosaurs, like mosasaur or mosasaur. I think I pronounced that correctly, or plesiosaurus. You know the dinosaurs that are bound to the sea. I think those are the sea monsters, and making that distinction between them because he's going to use this term uh, kinds when he gets to Well, it says here, then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures, and let
Mm.
birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that moves. So he makes a distinction between the two that swarm in the waters. So I think there's dinosaurs or sea dinosaurs and porpoise and whale and fish, plankton, you know, crustaceans, all kinds of different types of sea animals.
Any thoughts, Duran or Mike?
I agree. Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I would have to also. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that, even as you move historically, like non-canonical resources that are out there, they people who have taken voyages and things like that, um, they account for some of these. I would even say post flood situations that would otherwise be relegated to fantasy, where they're not really fantasy if Genesis says that they created them. So I would agree with Eric that that distinction is these very large, uh, amphibious or mammal-like dinosaur, reptilian dinosaur creatures that exist in conjunction with the smaller living creatures that are there as well.
Yeah, so yeah, you have marine reptiles, mammals in the sea,
Yeah,
like whales and porpoise, and all different types of fish and sharks and crabs and all that stuff. There's other places in the Old Testament that I think allude to the fact that the sea monsters, particularly, were dinosaurs,
Yeah,
and
Job.
specifically Job.
Hmm.
In
yeah,
Job, I believe it's chapter 7.
speaking of Leviathan, is that where you?
Rahab, I think, in Job 7, and then Leviathan
And
at the end
41.
of Job, I think, is a marine reptile, a massive marine reptile. I don't think it's a
Yeah.
crocodile or an alligator. Some people have argued it's a crocodile. I think it's much greater than that, much bigger than
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I've
And,
heard that too.
and we have they have found mosasaur. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Mosasaur. They found fossils of this particular marine reptile that can get up to 50 feet long on every continent on Earth. They found fossils of this thing,
Yeah.
and if you look at some of the renderings of them trying to figure out, a place what it looked like, etc., it's a pretty terrifying um, sea monster. Just a sea monster. I wouldn't want to run into it in the water. Um, and the thing, though, that you do see, though, when we're talking about this, even though the term sea monster, we read that in English here in the account of the creation week in Genesis, after um, he creates them, swarmed after their kind. There again, you say with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and so there's different kinds. God saw that it was good. And so I don't think these sea monsters were in a position before the fall to be
right,
so murderous as we see post fall.
right.
And
Hmm.
and I think there's a distinction between antediluvian, before the global flood, and then post diluvian, after the flood too, in the fact that they start eating meat.
Yeah,
They had shark teeth, probably, because we know that bears have shark teeth, and they use these shark teeth in their claws to eat berries and vegetation. And
Yeah.
everything before the fall, my position here, before the fall, before Genesis 3, is they're all vegetarians.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Yeah.
And so even though it says sea monster, that's not a negative thing. And it's not an allegorical chaos monster from the gap theory that we talked about in between
Mhm.
chapter 1, verse 1, and chapter 2. There's no gap theory. There's no grammatical or theological um, art in the text here that you can warrant a gap theory and try to insert millions and billions of years. And here, I think sea monster is a positive thing, because it says here, and God saw that it was good. and we know
Yeah,
the death
yeah,
and the violence that later happens during the Noahic flood.
yeah,
A lot of these dinosaurs were responsible for a lot of that violence, and I think a lot of the sea monsters went through changes because they were cursed because of the fall. And I mean, you see that in Genesis 3, where he curses the physical serpent, but God said, "Cursed are you more than all cattle." So he cursed
Hmm.
the animals, but
yeah.
it was the physical serpent that was cursed the most.
So,
Yeah, and that's I think the monstrosity of it that's described is the size, as Eric is saying, not the nature. It's not until you get to specifically, as you mentioned, Genesis 6:11, where God looks upon the earth and its corruption and its violence, and then He begins to deal accordingly. So, you have that violence filling the entire earth. I would say, as you look at His creation, all of those elements of His creation are producing violent outcomes. And so I believe, when gap theory is introduced, gap theory glorifies the corruption that God intended to judge.
mm,
Yeah,
So, it exalts death and corruption and violence and
and also
chaos.
yeah, and it also suggests that that was a reality here in chapter 1
But it
when it
wasn't.
can't be
Yeah,
because God wouldn't have said it was good. His
Yeah.
his
mm,
analysis,
true, true.
and as he's kind of looking at and he's giving his analysis after he creates um, is that it's good, and at the end of the creation he says very good. So we know that death, chaos, all those things that you mentioned, Duran, is that those aren't good things, and
Right.
yeah,
God
it's weird.
see those things as good.
But
Yeah,
you
because
have
we,
perfect. I mean, that means you have perfect harmony on the seas. Like
Yeah,
even in the seas, there's this perfect peace among the creatures that exist. So,
so
yeah, that's what
sight.
I was gonna. That's what I was gonna say. Is like
mm,
not just with the creatures, but with Adam and Eve. Like Adam. The way you guys are explaining it is that Adam could have gone up, and that monstrous creature would have gone by, and Adam wouldn't have like been taken aback by it or anything. He would have just like appreciated the beauty of it, and there would have been like no harm between the sea creatures or the land creatures or Adam and Eve or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah. Very, very
absolutely.
approachable because the fear of man is not put in the animals until the time of Noah anyway.
Right,
And,
right, right.
and so
Yeah,
very
that's a
approachable.
Noahic covenant.
100.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's going to
So,
happen in the future.
In the
Yes.
millennial kingdom,
yes,
there'll
yeah.
be a partial,
Yeah. That
there's
part,
going to
that
be a partial
harmony.
reverse
Yeah.
of a lot of those. Exactly. Yeah. You read that
Yeah.
in Isaiah.
Absolutely.
So since you mentioned dinosaurs, I'm pretty sure when people watch this, they're gonna they're probably gonna leave a comment or ask some kind of question concerning the dating of the fossil record.
Uh-huh.
And so if you guys could just touch on that for the briefly, kind of explain the difference, you know, because I know we've talked about this before concerning what the flood did. Because you remember I asked you about when I was driving through Utah, and was just wondering about how the mountains, the different levels of the mountains, and you guys had explained about the effects of the worldwide flood and how they
Hmm.
shifted things. So if you could just kind of explain how that would play into the dinosaurs and the fossil record um, to our listeners, that would be good.
I think the place to start there is some of the techniques and stuff that are kind of relatively novel, I guess, in modernism. Uniformitarianism and evolutionary theory are they came out in the 18th and 19th centuries anyway, and radiocarbon dating later than that, and really the view about the origins of the Earth, particularly because I think this is tied to in geology and trying to have a benchmark to to make sense of some of these dates that they're throwing out there, is that the actual view is they believe in uniformitarianism that there was a meteor shower and all those meteors collided together and created the Earth. And so you have layers of strata with the
Yeah.
Earth, and they have found that there's really no meteors in the deepest parts of the strata. They're really more closer to the surface.
Mm.
And so that's a big thing. And so they date the Earth around 4 billion years old. And that's through uniformitarianism. I'm talking about like secular scientists.
Yeah.
And you have the different periods that they talk about, like the Jurassic period, 65 million years ago. If you watch the latest Jurassic Park movie, there's a battle between Tyrannosaurus Rex and then this other like massive dinosaur that they think is like even worse than, even more terrorizing than Tyrannosaurus Rex. And they fight. Tyrannosaurus Rex dies, and then on the screen it says 65 million years later. And then they introduce the characters like in the current setting where the movie takes place, and that's all just it's all theory and speculation. There's no way that the
Yeah,
Earth.
it's a philosophical religion.
Yes,
It's a pagan religion, but it's a and I Eric, I say that too because scientific method is, even in secular science, that's what you're taught when you want to approach a theory and test the viability of that theory. And when you do that, if you test, so you observe, you measure, you experiment, you formulate, and then you test. And if your test comes out inaccurate with the theory, you modify your hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
But in this evolutionary presupposition, you don't get to modify your hypothesis. You sweep evidence to the contrary under the rug. To me, when you stop doing that, that's not science. I mean, when you start doing that, that's not science. That's a religion. And a false religion sweeps evidence under the rug. True religion lets truth have its day. So for me, when you talk about these events that have to do with the age of the earth, you have to understand that which can be tested, and if it agrees with a certain model, you can't eliminate that model just because it doesn't agree with secular science, which is lucrative.
Right.
So I think that's where you start there. I also believe it's what Eric is getting at, that much of the things that are read today are read from a culture of death, as opposed to, a culture of life as opposed to a culture of death. And so you have people saying when they find strata and fossil records, they're saying that those layers of records represent life just evolving. Whereas we know from the flood, what is found, what is evidence represents death as it has been encased in whatever is found. So, I believe that both are approaching these matters by faith, but one is having faith in a system that doesn't hack or compose the evidence. They just change terms. So, for example, you don't have any fossil record that exists today that represents a change of kinds over time. Right. And they conflate,
where you can actually see
adaptation.
That process happening in the fossil record.
Right. They conflate adaptation with the term change of kinds.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you can just confuse people because you control the terms.
Yeah.
But, again, if I'm looking at a fossil record and it doesn't produce a change of kind over that amount of time, then I have to modify my hypothesis. That would be true science.
Yeah. And there's no evidence in the fossil record of any evolution from in a different in new species, and the way that they actually theorize and the way they lay it out. And so the issue is really you have two options, and I agree. You said something I agree, Duran. It's an issue of faith, and so they're putting faith in something that they have not observed or seen. And science in the scientific method you're talking about, it can tell us, observe the way things are happening right now, but it can never tell us about origins or how they came to be, because this can never be replicated in a laboratory.
Yeah,
and so you really have two options. You have uniformitarianism or catastrophism, the flood, the global event where these dinosaurs, all these animals were fossilized through what happened as the waters were coming down and they're getting stuck, and the pressure and being placed in the earth as such, versus uniformitarianism. They really have no explanation of how those animals became fossils, and they found men with the dinosaurs too in the fossil record
and soft tissue.
There's also to answer your question too, Chris. There's there's a scientist that got fired from the University of um, South California, I think, Northridge. Is that right, Duran? That
Yes.
he found
Yes.
soft
He said.
tissue in a Triceratops horn and published his findings. And
Yeah,
he
I
happens to
remember
be
that.
a young Earth creationist. But there's another woman in North Carolina that found soft tissue in
Yeah.
one of the bones of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and she doesn't have a young Earth presupposition. And she published her findings and said this questions everything that we said about 65 million years ago in the Jurassic period or whatever.
Mm.
And so there's a lot of really good apologetics and evidence and real science coming out of quite a few um, young Earth creationists, which wasn't so much the case. Um, like if you go back, decades back, but it's really has a resurgence today, and it's really helpful. And I find a lot of stuff. The Answers in Genesis is one of them that's really helpful, just to read all these facts. I think it is important because you get to
Yeah.
see men that have dedicated their lives to investigating these things and publishing their findings and are free to do so and aren't threatened about being fired from a university because they have a uniformitarian presupposition.
Mm.
And when I read Genesis, I grew up going to public school. I was taught about the Pangea thing, theory, um, evolution. The different periods when the dinosaurs lived, the Jurassic period, and 65 million years, and the Earth is 4 billion years old, and all the meteors coming together and creating the Earth, all that stuff. And but then when I was regenerated, was born again, I picked up the Bible and started reading it. I read Genesis, and I was like, man, this makes so much more sense. Because I was even questioning some of the ridiculousness of evolution back when I was an unbeliever. But I read this, I was like, man, this makes so much sense, and this glorifies God. He's the creator, and this text here, this the first, the whole Bible, Genesis to Revelation. You get to Genesis chapter 1, it glorifies God for his attribute of veracity because he was actually there and he created, and this is his testimony. And so we
Right.
honor him and we give
Yep.
glory to him as the God of truth, our creator, when we believe exactly what he says here.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to the age of the dinosaurs, it was on the fifth. It was on the fifth day that the sea, um, the marine reptiles were created, I believe, and they were created individually mature. It wasn't a long process. The eggs didn't come first. The actual, um, creatures came first, and same thing with the birds. And then he created the land dinosaurs on the sixth day. And it was when God spoke, and they came into existence, and it was instantaneously. And
Right.
we're talking about 6 24-hour days here in the creation week. We appeal to Exodus chapter 20 in the giving of the law. God says that, and so the original recipients would have understood this as a literal week
Right.
with the 6 days, and then God rested on the seventh day. And there's no way around this. So again, we're talking about exegesis. We're talking about exposition, exegesis drawing out the author's intended meaning, and then exposition explaining the author's intended meaning. You can't arrive at anything other than that. If you're a theistic evolutionist, then you're actually making the same presuppositions as the atheists do, as far as how things came to be. But like Duran said, like the scientific method can't really tell us how things came to be. They can observe things are today, but not how they came to be. And like you said, the Earth has the appearance of age, and that would make sense if it was completely submerged underwater. And
Right.
you see the destructive power of water. Can you imagine as it's coming down, and as the floods ended and the waters are coming down, it would have the serious appearance of age when it was completely drenched underwater. The entire Earth, a global flood.
Yep. Absolutely.
So you guys have any comments on the birds other than the fact that they fly in the air? Any thoughts on the birds at
I think
all?
I think it's neat that you have basically a tripartite or trichotomy of ecosystems here with the heavens or the skies, the atmosphere, and then the seas, and then the dry land, and how we outlined this before. Like you were going over, Chris, I think a couple episodes ago, where like day one corresponds with
Day four.
day
Yeah.
4, and
Yeah.
then day 2 corresponds with day 5, and then because you go back to tohu wa bohu, formless and void, and that's not arguing a gap theory. That's just showing us that that was the condition of the
Hmm.
earth, and that which is formless is actually formed in the first 3 days, and then he fills the bohu part of things. He fills it, and he fills these the tripartite atmospheres, or trichotomy of ecosystems.
I never thought about it as in threes. Um, that's an interesting take on that.
Yeah, because I think tohu wa bohu is basically giving us a divinely inspired outline of the step-by-step process through the creation week.
Mhm.
And it's just the harmony here, and just grammatically, and the way that it's laid out is just brilliant. I love Genesis chapter 1.
Oh, it's a beautiful text. I mean, the whole Bible is, of course, but
Yeah.
some texts you read them, and when you actually like really study them and understand them, it just kind of the way it's worded and the way it all's connected, it just kind of some texts you just have a greater appreciation for than others. It's not that you value them more than the other ones. It's just some of them have a greater impact in certain ways. Um, for me, this just going through Genesis 1 through 3, when I was teaching, just really, and then talking with you guys and understanding about the pre-fall and post-fall, that just really helped me out a lot, in having even greater appreciation of Genesis chapter 1. So yeah, I appreciate these conversations that we have. I believe the people who actually watch, they appreciate it as well. So, but yeah, nothing about the birds. We good with the birds. I know
We're
Duran,
good there.
you and I talk about birds a lot. Look at pictures
Love them. Love them,
like the
man.
like the pileated woodpecker and things like that. So,
Nah, they're
all right.
beautiful.
Yeah,
So we don't.
the only the thing here with the birds is um, let the birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens, and then and every winged bird after its kind. So it's the same thing. I think that there's even just like there's dinosaurs in the sea, or seagoing dinosaurs or marine reptiles. I think that there's also those that could fly, and
Like
like Duran said,
pterodactyls, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And Duran was pointing out that there's been um, civilizations that have documented what they call dragons, and I think
Yeah.
that those are um, flying dinosaurs.
Yep.
All right, so let's get to day 6. And again, the same question that I had in reference to the sea monsters. So again, Moses here in writing, he makes a distinction between the land creatures. He says there's cattle, and then he says there's creeping things, and then he says there's beasts of the earth.
Mm.
So what are you guys' thoughts about those distinctions there?
Yeah, I would say it's the same. Same with reference to the distinctions that are related to the sea creatures. So I think you have land animals, kinds that are represented, but then I also think you have a distinction with regard to the size and scope of other animals, and so it's describing those kind of animals such as cattle and other things, but I think it's also describing large animals such as dinosaurs and uh, other creatures that are certainly monstrous in size. So
The
uh,
beast of the earth, yeah, right.
yeah, the beast of the earth. So you're talking about, again, I don't believe yet the text is talking about their nature. because a lot of the objections to a creationist view of dinosaurs is because that's not married to a good, benevolent creator who has a perfect creation. So people wonder, how can man and dinosaurs be compatible on the earth? Because they're not viewing it from the lens of the very good creation. So, if you have a perfect creation, you don't have a lack of compatibility between large scale animals and man being created. So
no, I have seen a different. I don't know if you call it a different angle or whatever, but where so I've read that because Moses was writing so far removed from the creation, like he wasn't actually present there.
yeah,
So he was writing from his understanding in
I,
his climate.
Yeah,
I would disagree. I would disagree. Oh, go ahead, Eric. Go ahead, brother.
I was just saying that just messes with Theopneustos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was
Of,
gonna say.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yeah, because I mean Moses is the mouthpiece of God, so
Mhm.
God is speaking to and through Moses. So to and through.
Yeah, and we don't
So
hold a flat Earth view, but you do have a sense in Genesis that this is described from a geocentric perspective, as
yeah,
Moses is looking up at the sun, the moon, the stars, and looking at around him as God's giving him this revelation. But that does not mean flat Earth by any means.
no.
Just want to make sure
I
that's
would say,
clear. Or that
yeah,
the Earth is the center of our solar system. Obviously, we go around the sun, not the sun going around us. So even this sunset and sunrise kind of sounds like the sun is going around the Earth and is moving across the sky. But that's explaining these things from a geocentric perspective.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I would just say even like with respect to the literal historical grammatical hermeneutics that the scripture themselves testify that we ought to interpret it in that way. I
Mm-hmm.
think Moses, his objective is not necessarily trying to find the best contemporary discourse method for whoever is his audience. He has one task and one task alone. He's got to tell the people of Israel the Torah as given to him by God. And so that is his objective, and it is divine revelation to receive it as such, obey it as such, and be visited with consequences if they disobey it as such. And so I don't think there's any room for it even to just be seen as like just a contemporary discourse or one man's opinion or kind of like a seminar. I believe he is giving divine revelation as a prophet. And we see that when we come to the end of Torah because his failure to enter into the land is because he is judged as a prophet. He's judged as a man who was, certainly one who had faith in Yahweh, but he's also held to that standard as well. So I don't believe that is distinguished in his speech. Like I think everything he says has to be perfect because it's coming from the very mouth of God, so to speak.
Uh, Another one also that I
Mm-hmm.
read, but this is in reference to the Hebrew. Um, but it was reading the Hebrew, possibly the cattle doesn't just mean like cows necessarily, but it's in reference to domesticated animals. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
I think I have, yeah. I think I have heard that argument.
And then the beasts of the earth would include the wild animals as opposed to domesticated.
Well, it's interesting in Genesis 3 when God cursed the physical serpent. Cursed are you, and this is what it reads in English. Cursed are you more than all cattle.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and But then in chapter 3:1 in English it reads, "Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the beasts of the field which the Lord God had made." And so you got to look at those Hebrew words and distinctions between, um, the classification, or what's the word I'm looking for? Taxonomy.
Taxonomy, yeah.
Yeah, of different kinds.
Yeah, and
The
I know within ancient Israel's culture, because you have to account for that as well in the ancient Near East. it was I mean, domesticated for you and I mean like, not you and I, because I don't think any of us do this, but like the dog who gets treated better than the people in the house, like that's domesticated today. But I think the domesticated animals in ancient, because again, we have to look at the culture to that respect. I think in their context, they had a functional use as well.
Animal
And
husband.
so, yeah, so I don't think the distinction of domestication versus wild is so distinct as it would be today, just looking back to their time. So I still think that, upholding the fact that there is a distinction between the size of the animals and their scope. Because at this time in the creation, none of them could be considered wild versus domestic.
Right.
Because I believe that distinction will come post fall. Like I believe, the dominion that Adam has to exercise
is overall
certainly there. Yeah, it's certainly there, but they're cooperative in that. Whereas post fall, you now have, this fighting back with both reference to the earth itself, relationally between husband and wife, and the animals fighting back against the people, with that resident fear that'll be placed in them post flood.
All right.
But behemoth, I think, is
That's the
Job,
Hebrew.
absolutely.
This theropod dinosaur, it described in Job chapter 40.
Yep.
I don't think
Absolutely.
it's the I don't think it's the hippopotamus.
Right. Yeah. I clicked on because I have my logos up, and so I right clicked on cattle, and the Hebrew word was behema, which I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong with the etymology, but I'm assuming that's where the word behemoth comes from.
That'd be something
Yeah.
to look into.
Yeah.
It says
I
he
was
eats grass like an ox. Right
Yeah.
under it. It's a
Job.
distinction. So
So ox is pretty big. I mean,
yes.
yeah, they're not
Yeah.
tiny.
So there's a
at all.
contrast.
It bends his tail.
But
Like
but it's amazing
Peter.
because what you
That'd be
even see, even when David is protecting the sheep, like he names, the animals that he fought off, in that course to do that. So again, I really think the size and scope of animals versus those which were naturally to the eye, maybe not as imposing, I certainly believe that that's in play.
Yeah, 'cause
Not
it
yet with
looks.
reference to their nature.
Yeah, it looks like there's two different words being used here. I'd have to look
Mm-hmm.
into it a little bit more.
Okay.
No, that's a good question though. But I do believe behemoth is certainly it's not like a simple
Yeah.
animal, like a simple cattle.
Well,
And nor is it. I heard. Yeah, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
specifically in Job, like a lot of people would argue that the behemoth is the hippopotamus and Leviathan is a crocodile, or the
Yeah,
allegorical,
no, no.
or they're approaching from more of an allegorical sense that this is just it's the meaning behind it, like
That's what I was
Leviathan.
just about to say.
But Leviathan is like the chaos monster or something, but it's specifically in my view, and I know you men hold the same view, is that behemoth is some sort of sauropod dinosaur, and Leviathan is a massive marine reptile, I think, but a massive, most ferocious of all the marine reptiles.
Yeah. Yeah. Eric took. Yeah, he took what I was. He went right to it. I heard probably. I'm not gonna say where, but I heard the worst lecture of mine. I heard some bad ones. I heard the worst lecture of my life on Job, and they allegorized.
Even among circles that say that they hold a young Earth.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
And
allegorized
even
Leviathan and
guys that
Behemoth.
even guys claim that they're premillennial, not amillennial, but they took an amillennial type of allegorical interpretation in the book of Job,
Right.
and we were sitting under it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
The worst, the worst. Tyler's about to bring that up. Eric beat me to it, so I'm gonna leave it alone. But that's out there as well. I believe it's a literal large scale, what we would know as dinosaur like creature that's distinguished from the other creatures that would be of smaller scope and size.
All right, let's get into day 6. I think I mean, we could probably discuss one passage for like months, but not knowing us. But let's go ahead and move on from that. I think we've answered the questions pretty well here. So let's get into day 6. And of course, the first question is, who is the us in verse 26?
Yeah, that's a reference to the eternal triune God, the
And
eternal
God,
Trinity.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you look at verse 26, then God said, let us, that's plural, make man in our image, singular, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over the cattle and over all the earth and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And so you have both plural and singular uses there if you look at the Hebrew, right? Chapter 1, verse 26.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Elohim. Let
Yeah.
me click on it. Yeah, it's a verb. Oh, sorry, wrong one.
Let us, the word us,
So it's
and our image, the word image, according to our likeness.
are you acting up?
The
See.
question is our plural and likeness, is that singular? And that's verse 26, I think, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that one's singular. Image, the first image is singular.
yeah, so a common noun, singular construct. And then likeness is common noun, feminine, singular.
Yeah, but let us make, that's plural, right?
Right. Let us
Yeah.
is plural. Yeah.
And in our
Let's,
image is singular.
Yes.
According to our likeness, is that plural?
no, likeness, like image and
Yeah,
likeness
yeah.
are both singular.
Yeah, those are singular, but let us make is
It's
the
plural.
construct is plural. Yeah.
So let's make man in our image, and then according to our likeness, that verb there,
Hmm.
um, actually preposition, and then noun. So that construct there, what is that? That's
No, that it's still singular.
okay.
Singular. Yeah. According to our likeness, singular. Let them rule over.
Yeah, so the phrase in our image and the phrase according to our likeness are both singular, while the let us make is plural.
Yeah. I mean
So,
the Elohim, and I know there's a lot of arguments around the Elohim, but Elohim
oh
is a
yeah.
plural construct.
So yeah, so you have the divine council argument or the heavenly court argument um in reference to Elohim. And then what was the other one? Then of course you have the standard one, which is that it's the Trinity. Um and then the one you and I talked about, Duran, the plural of majesty, which we we don't agree with, of course.
No.
And then there was another one I saw that was talking about it was a plural of self-deliberation, which kind of goes toward the oneness of God.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I would see it as a Trinitarian construct. And I think we had said it before. Like one of the things that I would go to is the fact that again, it's Moses speaking to the Israelites, and the understanding that they're going to have is the very nature of God Himself. Now, what I'm not saying is that has played out in totality to the point where the new covenant is going to explain it very clearly. But remember, when Jesus begins to talk about the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, the new covenant has not begun yet. It hadn't begun.
Hmm.
They were at the end of the old covenant, about to usher in the new at the ratification that took place on Calvary, namely his substitutionary vicarious death on the cross. and then his resurrection. So my point is, he begins to speak about the Trinity before that. And so I believe that the buildup is for them to understand the essence and nature and oneness of God, yet the fact that God is triune. So in his personhood. So I really don't go with the arguments that would say that in order to protect the fact that progressive revelation isn't working itself all the way out, that we have to go with the plural of majesty, the divine counsel, and all those other arguments. Again, in its simplest form, Moses is giving the Israelites everything they would need to come to terms with who God is in the establishment of the nation, and to be advocates on his behalf, and to be evangelists on his behalf. And so, you know, go ahead, brother.
Well, the book of Genesis does. There's another place too where it presents distinction in we know the Trinity is God is one nature, one being, one essence, in three distinct persons.
Right.
The Son is not the Father. The Father is not the Spirit. But we
Right.
see in chapter 1, verse 2, the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. And then later when Sodom and Gomorrah is about to be destroyed, or when it is destroyed, the text reads, I'm paraphrasing, that there's Yahweh rained down fire and brimstone from out of Yahweh who's in heaven. So I'm paraphrasing there. I think, what chapter is that, 19? Let me just actually read the text.
I believe so.
It shows
I'll check it.
Yeah. Then the Lord, that's Yahweh, Hebrew, rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And the same term is used for Lord, Yahweh. There you have two distinct persons, and both are referred to as Yahweh. And so you do have the revelation of the doctrine of the Trinity here in the book of Genesis. So you're appealing to Genesis chapter 1, and then also in Genesis chapter 19, we see it. And so it has to be, and so there's different views that you went over. What were those again? Divine plural of majesty or something?
Yeah, the plural of majesty was the other option.
Uh-huh.
And then there's a plural of self-deliberation, which basically is more so hinting at the monotheistic, the one godness part. That God, that in essence, the plural of self-deliberation is the argument saying that just basically that God was talking to himself.
Yeah, and so there's traces of Sabellianism and modalism, and I think in some of those that people can get away with saying it that way, and hold to modalism or Sabellianism, anti-Trinitarian positions, heretical positions that attack the Trinity. And then you also went over the fact that there's a view out there that God's talking to the angels.
Yeah.
Was
that the
part?
divine counsel one? Was that the divine counsel?
Yeah, is that what that means? Divine
Oh yeah,
counsel?
yeah. Yes.
Like
That's
us?
the divine counsel one. Michael Heiser, I know you guys. Well, you should be familiar with Michael Heiser. I think you guys are, but he's big on the divine counsel part. He's the one who's pushing the argument that God was actually talking to the angels
And so
at this point.
would he argue the same thing in chapter 3:22? And the Lord God said, "Behold, the man has become like one of us."
Yes.
Knowing good and evil. So you also have that view there too, right? Yeah.
Yes. And also, I think Psalm 82. I think he uses that same reference there.
So in that argument, is he saying that it's just God having a discourse with angels, or God somehow sharing intricate counsel with the angels?
Not to misrepresent, but I believe from what I've read from him, because I did look at his book. I think it's called The Unseen Realm. I think it's called.
Okay.
And I think I could look it up right quick, but I think what he's saying is that God was actually asking, like it was actually a conversation, like they were not quite equals, but like he was consulting with the
Yeah,
angels.
my issue with that would be that, like, that's my issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
But my issue would also be that it eliminates Moses' function as a prophet to the people, because God intends in discourse to give this to the Israelites. Like, so we're introducing so many mediators in the theater that it's like the message is getting lost. But I would not see God in any way at this point in Revelation as having any reason to counsel to counsel his angels on any particular action. I mean, later, even when he does what he has to do, his angels are dispatched. But I don't even see biblically where angels serve rank and function as informing God in matters of, because listen, Torah is meant to lead the Israelites to the unworthiness of themselves in sin, so that they
Mhm.
can offer the sacrifices in faith and live obedient to Yahweh, demonstrating their salvation. My point is, the angels have no place in that. So the angels, the angelic host, have no except to mediate the terms of the covenant as said in Hebrews. But they don't function in a counselor role to inform God on any particular acts. I think then we lose something in the essence and nature of who God is if we introduce that argument. Um, I would say, because Moses is the mouthpiece, the Israelites are the audience.
Right.
And I think we would all agree that that's kind of
Yeah.
what's in play. I don't believe they're, I don't believe the audience is kind of the modern reader, and angels, we're looking at a mythological account where the angels are, in this discourse with God. I don't believe that that's the case.
Yeah. So yeah, I definitely would go to this passage and there's other ones mentioned
Yeah.
to argue that this is clear evidence of the doctrine of the Trinity that we read about in the end of the book of Matthew 28 with the Granville Sharp rule.
Yeah.
And here you see it clearly with the use of the singular and plural usage here in 126.
Yeah.
And yeah, we have progressive revelation in the New Testament that definitely makes this it definitely helps, and
Mhm.
Scripture interprets Scripture,
Yeah.
the analogy of faith, and but I think it's clearly revealed here. I think really chapter 19, man, is such a helpful
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a good one to bring up.
because of the use of Yahweh there.
Okay. Okay. I found. I was.
Kind of what he was. Yeah.
Yeah. I was listening to you guys, but I wanted to find because he's so he's basically his error. I mean, I'm not a scholar, of course. Still shoo what I say away because I'm not an academic scholar. But my issue with him is that he tries to superimpose ancient Near Eastern views onto the scriptures.
Yeah,
And that's where
100%. Yeah.
his error is. So basically he says um the Hebrew Bible has phrases that explicitly parallel Ugaritic expressions.
Yeah.
Um and he talks about Psalm 82. He says it calls the council and describes gods under the authority of Israel's God. So he says God stands in the council of El, the divine council. Among the gods he passes judgment. He says the second occurrence of Elohim must be semantically plural due to the preposition in the midst of. This does not refer to the Trinity. Psalm 82 goes on to describe how Israel's God accuses the other Elohim of corruption and sentences them to die like humankind. And this plurality does not refer to human beings. So he's basically kind of all over the place.
Man,
It's
that's not
source.
even.
It's
He's not even right. Yeah, it is source criticism. He's not
and
even right
also
in interpreting Psalm 82.
right.
Yeah.
So here's where it gets worse because he says in Psalm 89 verses 5 through 7, which say, the heavens will praise your wonders, your faithfulness in the assembly of the saints. For who in the heavens can be compared to the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened to the Lord? God is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints. And so he says that that places the God of Israel in the assembly of the holy ones. And then he asks for who in the clouds can be compared to Yahweh? Who is like Yahweh among the sons of God? And he used the Hebrew phrase is Bene Elohim. And he says, a God greatly feared in the council of the holy ones. And so he basically is putting God within this assembly of all of these other so-called divine Elohim,
Mm.
which is a very
Yes, so
grave
did
mistake.
everybody else outside of Israel.
Yeah. I wonder if he holds
That's why the Torah is delivered this way. I mean,
yeah,
essentially.
with the amalgamation with ancient Near East texts. I wonder um, if he holds to the gap theory too, because a lot of these
Yeah.
ancient Near East origin stories have got a deity fighting the chaos monster,
Hmm.
Yes.
or like a yin and the yang mixture of good and evil, dualism happening. I wonder if
Yeah.
he also might hold to the gap theory, because I think essentially the gap theory allows for that. And that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons why I rejected it.
I have his Unseen Realm book. I started kind of reading it just out of curiosity, but then I pretty much quickly closed it because it's just not.
Yeah, with the benefit, I'm surprised that one would conclude that with the benefit of New Testament revelation, because you
That's yeah.
know Paul seems to intimate very, very, very clearly that the angels long to look into salvation, understanding, the I would say understanding the terms with which it's delivered
Mhm.
to the people to whom it's delivered, which would tell me that there's counsel that they simply are not. They're not privy to the counsel as to why God does what He does on a level that's beyond His revelation in that area. But they do execute what He wills them to execute. But my point is, you never see them and Him on this equal plane, um, which is why I asked the first question I asked about that, like, because that would seem to bring God down to just common, to just a common thing.
Mhm.
And so I always go back to the simple question: what would Moses, by God, have wanted the Israelites to hear? And I could say it the other way: what would God, through Moses, want to speak to the Israelites? So I think when you add all these complexities in there, it really gets away from, what is the natural way that the people were to understand it? Because
Mhm.
what's about to happen is Exodus and Leviticus, where God openly challenges all the other gods on the basis of His name and delivers His people, and then the installation of the Mosaic covenant, which shows here's how you're to live. You're to live holy. You're to live separate. You're to live distinct from the nations around you. And so,
Mhm.
why it would then stand to biblically reason that He would disclose Himself as distinct from the others. So, I believe that I am His covenant name for all generations, Exodus 3:14 and beyond, is in light of what is said in this particular chapter and verse. So, I think
Interesting.
both are connected.
Yeah, interestingly enough, I just looked. He doesn't hold to the gap theory.
He doesn't.
No,
Okay.
That is interesting.
I
He is all
basically
over.
I call him so. Michael Heiser is to the Old Testament what Bart Ehrman is to the New Testament. Basically,
Okay, that
That's
makes
not good.
sense.
that's
Yeah,
that's the way I
That's
view
not good.
No,
but I get the analogy.
it. Well, there's
Because
a lot of people out.
Bart Ehrman, he knows how to I ain't gonna say nothing, but people try to sue you and stuff. Some of these
Razzle and
people know
dazzle.
how to they know how to mess up a text. They can mess up a gospel. They can mess up the
Yeah,
gospels.
yeah.
But
that's
no,
So
why, Duran. That is why, Duran. He's messing with that. He's
yeah,
messing with the
absolutely,
Son. He's messing with the
absolutely,
sonship because he spoke through the prophets, and in the last days he spoke through the Son, and so he's attacking
yes,
Christ's finished work ultimately.
mhm,
It's
mhm.
absolutely,
unbelief, and that's heresy.
absolutely.
Yeah, he's
Yeah, so
Michael
that's
Heiser is the next big thing out right now. Everybody's running to him. He talks about the Watchers, and he has his take on the Nephilim, and
Well, the
I've been
Watchers
kind of
from
Yeah,
Enoch.
Paul warned
Yeah.
about men like him in Colossae. You know, this over infatuation with and overinflation of the angelic host.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I've been researching him lately just so I can have some information because I've been asked several times my thoughts on him, and I'm like, I don't really have I want to make sure I have a solidified answer for everybody.
Yeah.
So I've been reading his stuff and reading other texts that he wrote and listening to. He's actually, if I'm not mistaken, he's at a church in Jacksonville right now. He actually started a school,
Oh,
There's a
some kind
school.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't remember the name of it. I had to look it up. But it's a church in Jacksonville called Celebration Church, and I think he is over there, and he started a school there.
It's
It's
called
called it's
Awakening School of
Awakening. Yeah,
Theology.
yep, that's it. It just hit me in the. I had
Yeah.
just remembered.
the place is called Celebration.
Yeah, so it's a
Yes.
Well, audience, beware.
it
Yeah.
is
Go
a
there.
New Apostolic Reformation ish,
Oh,
word faith ish kind of.
Run
Yeah,
from that
yeah,
place.
basically run. Yeah,
Beware. Stay
that's so
away.
sad. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, no. So I think you have to begin with what was God communicating through Moses, and what did the people need to hear as they're about to at some point go into captivity,
mhm,
leave captivity, get into the land, and then go into captivity again. I mean, it's like what is it that God is communicating through Moses? And I think
all right.
when men introduce all these novel linguistic novelties, I use novel twice for emphasis, it really confuses. I mean, it
Yeah.
confuses the role of the prophet Moses himself.
Mhm.
And to be honest with you, it's why Jesus had a problem in John 8 against the Pharisees, because they were doing the same thing to Abraham and Moses. They were doing the same thing.
I think that's where we because you and I talk about Merrill, Eugene,
Yeah, yeah,
the kingdom of priests. I think that's where
yeah,
the kingdom of priests has been very helpful for me because it helps me to place Israel where they're
yeah.
supposed to be.
That's a great book.
Right, and then you can
It is,
now
man.
you
His Old
understand
Testament
that
survey as
background, and
well.
you understand
Yeah,
that background, and you can put the text of the Torah where it belongs.
yeah. He probably. I mean, I'm trying to think of him. He probably is one of the last. He's got to be in his 90s now, I think. But he's one of the last living kind of Old Testament, unashamed, conservative scholars.
Yeah.
I only use that in quotes because conservative means so many things. But I mean, like,
Mhm.
theologically conservative.
Mhm.
Like, because so many say that they are and they don't mind flirting with a heresy or two. But I mean, like, with him, he really is. Like, he just historical, grammatical approach.
Heresy or two.
Yeah, they pride themselves on that. You know, a heresy or two.
Whatever that is.
As long as it's not three. You got to triage it.
The sad thing is, man, you're right, man. This guy's something else, man.
All
I
right.
couldn't see Eric's face. I didn't know he was laughing at.
Yeah, he was. So
Like,
so we talked about the letters. We still got a few minutes, so let's get into the image and likeness. What are you guys' thoughts on?
Man, I think this should take a podcast in of itself. This is heavy,
yeah.
heavy.
Let's skip that then, and let's talk about what dominion means. Can we do that?
Yeah. You
And then
guys
we
just
can, and then the next podcast we'll come back and we'll spend the whole podcast talking about image and likeness.
yeah. I mean, there's really three views, and dominion would be one of those
Yeah.
functional views. So there's the relational view, there's the dominion view, and then there's the substantival view. And there's a lot to this. But are you guys familiar with dominion theology?
Oh yes.
Yes. Yeah.
So, correct me if I'm wrong. That has to do with like post millennialism would be an example of that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Taking
Yeah.
back the
Well,
earth.
they would hold that, but yes.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
think if you just focus on that, you run into that's where they argue from this passage.
Yeah. Like theonomy.
There's
And
warrant for their position because that's what
yeah.
that's what it means to be made in the image of God. And
Yeah, I was kind of going to ask you like which dominion theology are you referring to? Because I know in the Pentecostal charismatic
Yeah, there's that too.
word of faith, New Apostolic Reformation circles, it
yeah.
means something different
Oh, really?
as opposed
Yeah.
to
What
the
does it mean?
post
What does it mean in
millennials.
the charismatic?
Yeah, it would be like the name it, claim it, the ability to command,
Speaking
Speak
things into
things.
yeah,
Yep.
existence.
command
Yep.
divine things to move on your behalf. Now it's taken more of the new age twist with like manifesting and all that foolishness that's out there.
Positive confession,
Yeah,
I
uh,
wrote it. I wrote an article.
having power over demons and that kind of stuff.
I wrote an article.
mind of the
Biblical Christ Research Institute, where I have all three of the views and I analyze it and
oh, it's excellent.
talk about how the danger of just overemphasizing, um, either the dominion, the relational or substantival, without actually considering all that we have here from the text. Because clearly, right after that, he said, "Then God said, let us make man in our image after our likeness, and let him have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heaven, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them. And male and female, the relational aspect to this, but I think also being self-conscious and not just conscious of your surroundings, but being self-aware and knowing that you are and being rational in that sense. There's
Yeah.
been many explanations to what the image of God and man is, and if you read that article, that's what I'm saying. It'd probably take like going over all these points would take another hour or so because
Yeah.
there's so much
So
going on here.
yeah. So what I was going to say is we can stop. Let's just call it. We can call it right here, and then the next two podcasts we'll do one on image and likeness,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll do one on those three views,
Okay.
or two, or however many. So that way we can really kind of dig into those things, because I want to make sure our audience understands the sort of like we did today, and we talked about the different views and why these views aren't good and why these views aren't and these views are really bad, and this is the textual view. This is the view that comes straight from the text. I want to make sure that we do that on those episodes so that the people that watch it can gain an understanding of what and would be able to discern the truth from the error. um and then they can be better equipped, so when they run into those issues with people, then they'll be better equipped to answer those questions themselves.
Yeah.
So
That sounds like a good plan, man.
yeah. So I appreciate you
Thank you for
guys
that.
as always. It's always a pleasure to get on with you guys. I know we haven't done it in a while because we got all kind of things going on in our lives. But I think this once a month thing will work it out, and we'll be able to get on and fellowship with one another again. Like I said, I wish we were all in the same city, and hopefully somewhere down the line the Lord will work that out, where eventually we'll all be together. Um, but for now, this is great. Um, just fellowshipping with like-minded brothers in Christ. Again, shout out to Matt. Hopefully, we'll see you next time. Um, so we're gonna stop here, folks, and we'll continue this. The next time we meet will be the at the end of the month in October, and we'll put this one up as soon as I can get to it to process it, and I'll put this one up on our YouTube site. And eventually, when I get some more time, I'll go back and then I will transfer the video to audio, and then we'll put those on our SoundCloud page so you can have the audio as well. Um, but we thank you guys for your support, and we, of course, solicit your prayers. Continue to pray for us um, as we do our level best to rightly divide the word of truth and stand on the truths that are contained in the scriptures. So until next time, whatever you say, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you drink, do everything this week to the glory of God. God bless you all, and we'll see you next week.